we tried mixed reality for the first time, we knew we had the opportunity to change how people connect together. Today, we're going to bring you through a journey on home sports development, from diving into MR and uncovering some key principles, to leveraging meta-technologies, and maybe even inspire you to do the same.
So hello and welcome everyone. My name is Linnéa and I'm the tech lead of the project.
And I'm Clarisse, the project producer.
We are from Resolution Games, a Swedish studio that is based in Stockholm, which is an industry leader when it comes to creating virtual and mixed reality games. Founded in 2015, we have released 18 games across various platforms. And we are always eager to be at the forefront of new innovation. And we love working with new tech and the people behind it. But beyond just creating incredible games, we're all about creating virtual games that have a real impact on real people by connecting them from all over the world. And it is with this mindset that we created Home Sports.
So you might ask yourself, sounds cool, but what is home sports actually? So home sports is a collection of what we call miniaturized sports. Basically, you take the real life sports and you put it at the scale of your living room. So in home sports, it's good to know that we made this game exclusively for mixed reality, and it's only available on Meta Quest 3 and Quest 3S. In home sports, you can invite up to 3 of your friends and challenge them on 5 different sports. So we have pickleball, mini-golf, hockey, bowling, and badminton. You can play both remotely or locally, thanks to colocation. You can also enjoy a ton of solo contents. We made a very interesting career and story mode with a lot of drama. You can also compete our machine learning NPCs, as well as spring drills, or just trying to find an opponent online. But I just want to show you how it looks, all right?
Pretty nice, right? So our goal with Home Sports was to make it a seamless and super easy to pick up experience. And when you see it like this, it might seem very straightforward. But with most game development, it has been a journey of trial and errors. At Resolution, we started to experiment pretty early with mixed reality. And we noticed pretty fast that we needed to have a different approach than developing for VR. We needed to figure out how players actually move in their environment and make sure that our experience would fit any play space, no matter the size or configuration.
So one interesting conclusion that we came to after trying mixed reality for a bit was that, to us, mixed reality had a much lower entry barrier, especially compared to VR and when you take first-timers. Indeed, if you haven't tried it, just to tell you, you can really see your surroundings, so you don't feel as disoriented or isolated. So this led us to a theory. Maybe people owning a headset would be able to lend it more easily to their friends and family, and after they tried mixed reality for the first time, they would be a bit more keen on getting a headset as well. But for this bet to work, they would really need a very easy to pick up and play experience that they can both try out together or just enjoy. And this is exactly where we come in.
So combining our mission with this opportunity to reach a broader audience, we asked ourselves, what could be a social, yet easy to understand experience that connects people from all different backgrounds? After some brainstorming, we landed on sports. After all, most of us are introduced to sports already at a young age, so interactions should be pretty intuitive. And to prove that point, here we have a clip of a lesser-known game, the Swedish sport brännboll, and we are convinced that you would be able to tag along easily without even needing to know the rules. And sports are social by nature. They are filled with emotions like joy and suspense, teamwork and competition, but it is also a lot about learning and sharing.
So great news for us, we have found our guiding star, social sports. But we all know as devs that it's not enough to really make a very good experience. So we really had to ask ourselves, how can we make a fun and engaging experience using the strength of MR? So let us take you through some key discoveries that really helped us bring home sport from concept to execution. The first one that we discovered quickly was that the surrounding of the player is really anchoring them, and it takes priority over the virtual elements. It doesn't matter how fancy or pretty they were, people were really focused on what was happening around them. So we noticed it first in smaller interactions. Like we had a bunch of players online regularly say to other people, like, hey, be careful, don't step on my dog. But then they would realize, of course, it's virtual people, it can't happen. And as devs, we were quite also regularly at fault with that. Like we would be playtesting and then would point at virtual elements thinking, sure, my coworker without their headset, they can totally see what I'm seeing, right? And this is all fun, but then we also noticed some bigger complaints during gameplay. Whenever our virtual courts were covering the player's flooring, they would get quite annoyed, and they would complain that they can't see the floor, they can't see what's happening, they can't see their pet passing by, and they were quite disconnected with the experience.
And so, since the physical surrounding comes first, users will have a different relationship to the virtual objects. So if you look at VR, VR has the advantage of completely separating the player from reality by creating a clean slate. But for mixed reality, it has, in our opinion, a more limited suspension of disbelief. People would expect that virtual objects would behave similarly to the real ones. So we need to make sure that everything, from the realistic to the abstract ones, felt both natural and intuitive. In other words, affordant.
So let me jump in quickly. You might ask again, what is affordance? So affordance is a concept that we really like, where basically an object design makes it extremely clear how it could or should be used. I'm going to take a quick example that you actually can see all around the campus. So if you take a door and you put a very long vertical handle, people will tend to pull it. And if you take just the same door but with a flat surface, people will want to push it. Another example that we have from home sports that really show you why it's so important for us. In pickleball, our player can serve from what we call the serve sphere, where the ball is just floating. Now, we remove that serve sphere, and we just let the ball float there without any other indications. The player reported being very confused. Suddenly, the ball that they just played with a few seconds ago is not impacted with gravity. What's happening? And so this really proved to us that, sure, it doesn't sound like a big deal for gameplay, but actually, once again, it was taking the players away from the experience. And when you want to create such a good MR game that it really blends the physical and the virtual, you have to pay close attention to those type of things.
And talking about immersion killers, let's talk a bit about game stability. Because no matter how much we would improve our interactions, our visuals, or our gameplay, as soon as the game starts to show signs of being unstable, the players can't see anything else. It could be the smallest staggering or seeing the environment offsetting for just a few frames. That has the potential of just simply breaking the magic. And this is especially important early on in development, because we all know that is the time where those things tend to happen more often. But at the same time, that is also the time that is most crucial to be able to evaluate your experience, just to see that you are on the right track.
Another discovery that we had was all about movements. So we realized that mixed reality players tend to move a lot more wider, in the sense that compared to VR, since they can see their surroundings, they're more comfortable with fast-paced and broader swinging of the rackets. So on the other hand, we also realize that because they can see their surrounding, they tend to want to enjoy it a lot more than in VR. They want to make the best out of it and just navigate into it. So this was still great news for home sports, because if you get your user to use wider motion, it's such a great thing for the fantasy of the sports. However, it very early on taught us that we will have to accommodate to a lot of different play spaces, from big to small and anything in between.
Indeed, playing on a court that is too big or too small for a living room wouldn't feel the best, right? So this introduced one big challenge for us. How could we make sure that two players with two drastically different play space sizes available still could play sports together? And honestly, our solution could be another talk on its own, but the short version is that we landed on having 5 set different sizes that we dynamically scaled between the players, and also adjusting the physics accordingly. And of course, different experiences will require different solutions. But for MR, we think that it's important to take into account all the different vast range of spaces that a player can have, and try to figure out a balance between a defined and shareable space, while also trying as best as possible to adapt it to the user's available space. So these were the main discoveries that we tried to keep with us throughout development. We had the physical surroundings that anchor the players to the virtual. People will have a strong expectation on how virtual objects should behave. And an issue in game stability is an immersion killer. And in MR, player will move more freely. So from these, we built a solid foundation of the game and divided them into 3 key pillars that we relied on throughout development.
Indeed. So the first one was about immersion, enhancing the real with the virtual. This meant that whenever we were developing things, we had to constantly remind ourselves, wait a minute, how would it actually look in my own living room? It also meant that, we had to make sure that we were never distracting or abstracting from the real with virtual elements. The second one is about affordance, creating credible and self-explanatory interactions. When we were adding new elements to the game, we had to pay close attention to the player feedback. Does it behave the way they expected? Can they perform the action without any explanation? On the contrary, are they somehow confused by what they're seeing? Maybe the thing that we created and behaved exactly what we wanted was just not looking credible and realistic to them. The last pillar that we have is all about movement and enabling our players to move freely. So this meant to us that it was fundamental to really make sure that our game had very little to ideally no constraint when the player was moving, so they could really enjoy the world around them.
So in parallel to defining these pillars, we find the one crucial thing that ties them all together: the user's quality of life, or in other words, making the player experience frictionless. So through all of our explorations, trials, and errors, we found out that MR shines the brightest when the user's quality of life is the highest that it can be, with no disruption, no resistance, and limited external limitations. That is when the user forgets that they are in a virtual experience. And that is when we know that we have succeeded. So these were the things that we tried to keep improving again and again. So naturally, we started to listen to all of the little grievances and comments during our playtests. It could be comments like, I wish I could go and grab a glass of water while waiting for my turn. Or, I kept putting one of my controllers in my pocket during my mini-golf match.
And at Resolution, you might have understood that we love keeping an eye on new innovation and new technologies. So gradually, we realized that we were always putting a bit of time on the side to just mess around with new technologies in hope that maybe we could get rid of all those frictions. So we tried out some tools. Some worked super well. Some, you need a bit more love and care for them. You need to make them work. And some were just not the right fit for what we were building. However, throughout all that explorations, we have identified 5 key meta technologies that really helped us push home sport to the next level. And today, we not only want to share them with you, but we also want to show you how we actually use them.
So first up, we have the Boundary API, and more precisely, the boundaryless feature. And you don't need to worry, for all of the technologies that we will bring up, we will explain them briefly, just so everyone here is on the same page. So boundaries is the safety feature that lets the player set up limits to their playing area that will show up if you're getting too close to the edge. And boundaryless, as the name hints, allows for experiences without these limits. And for home sports, this meant a lot of more freedom. Now, players could start the app in their office and move away over to the living room without feeling restricted. They could also go and grab new batteries without taking off their headset, or just simply sit down on the couch and watching their friend hit a strike in bowling. And implementation-wise, we think it's pretty nice to save the place for the game, so that when you start the app again, you don't need to set it up again. You can just easily hand it over the headset.
Yeah, which is quite nice for our players as well. So the next one in line is multimodal. This one, we find it really cool, but maybe not as well known, actually. So it basically lets you track both hands and controller at the same time. We need to give you a tiny bit of backstory on that one. So in our ground quest for immersion and intuitive movement, we asked ourselves very early on, maybe we could just get rid of both controllers altogether. So we gave a go to hand tracking. However, reality caught up pretty fast, and we hit two major roadblocks. First of all, at the time, the technology was not quite fast enough to keep up with our motions. So sure, we could ask players to just do more careful and deliberate motion, but this would have gone against the movement pillar that we had. Secondly, the player actually reported being a bit confused by the lack of haptics, and they really missed the feeling of just holding something like you would do in a real sport with a racket. So in respect to our immersion pillar, we just had to give up the idea. But that's not fully true, because on home sports, we're a bit stubborn. Actually, what we learned with this is that, sure, we needed absolutely one controller, but did we really need both? So when we came across multimodal, we just had to give it a go. And now we have an experience where whenever they want to, the player can just drop one controller, keep one for their main actions, like hitting the ball, and just use their hand for smaller interaction, like navigating menus. And it creates a very natural and seamless experience.
And we just mentioned haptics. So let's deep dive a bit more with that, with the Meta Haptics Studio and SDK. Because we all know that haptics are key to making an experience feel more real. Because without that, it could feel off, since you wouldn't feel an object's weight nor strength when hitting. So think about this. Think about the difference between a slap shot with a hockey stick, or tossing a bowling ball, or just the difference between a soft and a hard hit in pickleball. They would all need different feedback. So thanks to the Meta Haptics Studio, we could fine-tune this thanks to two major things. We could create the haptics directly based on the sound files, so what you hear would perfectly match what you feel. And the Haptics Studio also enabled us to edit the clips more. So on top of the signal amplitude modulation, we can now do frequency modulations, or just put emphasis on strategic points in the files. So now we have more control and precise ways to elevate the experience even further when we're mixing mixed reality with the physical.
All right, so now it's time to move on to my personal favorites. It is colocation. You might also know it as shared spatial anchor. So this one is pretty cool. I know I say all of them are cool, but I really like this one. So basically, you can have two players in the same room, and they would share both the physical, of course, and the virtual. I just want to show you briefly how it looks from the headset itself. So now just imagine that. You can just bring the court home and play together. You don't need to to figure out where should we play, can we rent a space, do you have the gears, or what are the rules again? No, you just grab your headsets, You put it on, you get it running in seconds, and you just feel like you're on a real court badminton, or on a bowling lane, or in a mini golf park. Because in home sports, all the sports are playable in colocation. And actually, if you have enough space, you could play at the real sports scale.
But honestly, it hasn't all been smooth sailing to get it working. To get it actually working, what went pretty fast. Then, that explaining it to the players wasn't as easy. Our biggest problem was that we needed players to look around to map out the room. And that is not a very intuitive action, and it could feel forced if they don't understand why, where, or for how long they should look around. And presenting the technical terms to the players just left them confused. So we needed to find a playful way to make the players look around. So we added small bubbles around you that you needed to look at to collect. And as a safety net, we also require one person to manually define the other players' positions. And we took the liberty of just simplifying the wordings presented to the players so that anyone will be able to tag along. But now we have a great experience. It's very intuitive and extremely immersive. And it can be set up by anyone, even people trying mixed reality for the first time.
So I know I said that colocation was cool, and I think you can all agree that it has been quite a striking addition to home sports. However, we do think that the meta-avatar SDK has proven to be the core of the social experience, which is one of the foundations of home sports. So at Resolutions, we are quite familiar with the meta-avatars. We have already used them on past projects like Cookout or Bait. But we're also familiar with physical representations of players in a much broader sense. Indeed, on Demeo, we have used hands-only and goggles to represent the players. And in Racquet Club, we've used more advanced and customizable characters. So from the get-go, we knew that having such a credible physical representation is a vital part of sharing and really, connecting and transferring this presence of your online friends. And this was already true in VR, but when we saw it in MR, to me that was next level. I remember playing with our US colleagues once, and suddenly I could see their meta-avatar in my living room, and it really felt like they were there with me. Our interaction, their movement, their body language, everything felt extremely natural. But we gotta be honest with you. If you want to reach that level, you do need to have a technology that is, that has a lot of variation so your friends actually look like themselves, as well as having a solid and credible IK system. And you also need very good facial expressions. And for those reasons, we do believe that right now the Meta-Avatar SDK is one of the technologies that has gone through the most work and that can really help you get to that level.
So these were the 5 technologies that we wanted to bring up today. So let's do a quick recap of which they were. We had the boundaryless, that gave players even more freedom to move around in their space.
The multimodal one allowed our player to just drop one controller whenever they wanted and just enjoy hand tracking and controllers.
And we have the Meta Haptics SDK that enabled us to create even more realistic feedback to all the interactions.
Then we had colocation that allowed our players sharing the same space to enjoy a very intuitive and seamless experience.
And finally, the Meta Avatar SDK that brought the social experience to life.
So with this, we're concluding our journey into home sports. We have dived into the backstage of creating an MR-only social game, from figuring out some core ideas that were both working with our company mission and the strength of MR, to finding some key pillars and just enhancing the whole experience with the meta technologies. So we really hope that this gives you some fresh ideas on how to leverage some of those technologies, and they are even more available, but also that it maybe sparked some inspiration on new possibilities. On our side, we know we are thrilled to keep pushing the boundaries and to mess around and discover even more technologies, but also and definitely to keep creating even more exciting games.
So thank you so much for joining us on this journey. And we will soon jump into a Q&A, but before that, if you know any other cool new tech that you think could elevate home sports even further, we would love to hear from you. So please come and chat with us after the session. Thanks for having us.